Good morning, and thank you for joining our session. I'm Neha Mann. I'm a design researcher turned UX designer who was a graduate assistant at the time of co authoring this paper. I'm happy to be presenting this paper on behalf of my team, who are also my professors, Brooke, Brandewie, and Dr. Claudia Rebola. This paper describes an approach to teaching design strategy as innovation for social impact. We discuss a pedagogical approach for the curriculum for teaching design strategy as a core design research activity. The course Design Strategy at University of Cincinnati is a graduate level course for the Masters of Design program that I was a part of. It provides an introduction to design as a combination of strategic problem setting and problem solving activities within a service or social system levels approach for a multidisciplinary audience. Students explore methods of design thinking that apply to all design disciplines to identify problems, to further analyze these key problems with the aim of conceptualizing and further innovating design opportunities. More specifically, this paper advances an approach towards a framework for teaching design strategy through three main focus areas: trend as strategy, empathy as strategy, and vision as strategy. Each project was facilitated for a term of 5 weeks by a team of two design faculties, with each of the faculty's disciplinary strengths in mind. The first phase of this course focuses on trend as strategy. So, trend forecasting is defined as a strategic research practice that detects patterns or shifts in attitudes, mindsets, or lifestyle options that run against the current thinking of how people normally behave, live, dress, or trade. This foundational phase was added to develop a future forward lens of innovation among the students. Having that steady flow of external provocation on what is possible encourages experimentation and exploration of new ideas. Ultimately, trend forecasting adds value by providing clarity, provoking meaningful newness, and increasing self awareness. In learning this method, students become more aware of what is happening around them and think more critically about change and how to find these patterns and identify meaningful connections. This in turn prompts them to be more self reflective, thus aware of their own values, beliefs, and behaviors, and to consider these attributes in a broader societal context. Therefore, this methodology was used in the very beginning of the course to teach students how to set objectives of a strategic design project. The trend forecasting methodology provided an introduction for how to conduct well rounded contextual secondary research, as many students came from traditional design backgrounds that emphasized more of making, which was the what, as compared to researching, which was the why. So, the goals of this project were two-faced. So, the first was introducing students to best practices in trend analysis and forecasting when researching, collecting, analyzing, and synthesizing trend inputs. And the second was developing students' critical thinking skills by contextualizing their research through analysis of sociological, technical, economic, environmental, and political factors, which are also called the steep drivers of change. This also helps introduce methods and techniques for interrogating the trend topics to identify potential future implications. That is, the what ifs. What happens if we have identified this trend? What next? This particular group of students forecasted how social sounds will develop through voice UIs or wearable technology, or even as a nostalgic addition to emergent tech. Learning from several projects like these, it was understood that articulation of trend shifts was challenging for students. So, group work and frequent provocation from faculties was needed to aid in the framing of their content. It is also noteworthy that trend forecasting in itself is a very comprehensive research methodology that is taught in a 15-week undergrad course. So, condensing the learning process to 5 weeks was a challenge, given that the trend process usually requires rigorous several rounds of research, analysis, and synthesis. However, enabling students to work in groups alleviated some of those difficulties. Moving forward, it might be interesting to see how students use these trend themes as a starting point for strategic translation. That is, to identify the trend DNA and how that possibly could be leveraged for innovation opportunities for a brand or a category. The next phase of teaching design strategy was empathy as strategy. In an era where technology is outpacing human capability in many ways, humanistic and empathic mindsets and approaches are valued in design thinking and practice more than ever. Therefore, designers need to develop these crossover skills to conduct user research, analytical skills to interpret data, technical skills to translate it, and strategy to anticipate the system in which the innovation thrives. The second project focused on teaching students how to identify these opportunities for innovation within a local organization. Students were in the process introduced to several user centered mapping methods. Students utilized these methods to identify and propose strategies for systemic change in a local organization of their choice. They conducted interviews, identified challenges and obstacles of key stakeholders, then analyzed and synthesized these findings, which they visualized through these tools, which helped them both with researching the functions of the organization as well as frameworks to synthesize these findings. For example, this student worked with So Valley in Cincinnati, which is a communal space for small scale apparel production. So, this project really encouraged students to learn and practice primary and secondary design research methods. So, being able to select an organization of their own interest, it really encouraged students to become more self directed and curious within the project while connecting with potential employers. As feedback, it was noted that students really appreciated the breadth of tools and frameworks to make sense of their primary research. Further, faculty encouraged students to articulate their research through a variety of frameworks that made sense for their individual projects, yielding creativity and autonomy in their process and output. So, this student used personas and an archetype wheel to be able to really understand their brand very deeply. Finally, students responded positively to the display of their findings in the form of soft prototypes or visualizations, which was a refreshing alternative to digital presentations. The next phase was vision as strategy. The final 5 weeks really focused on learning critical assessment methods for developing strategies. It was identified that the real contribution of design strategy may lie in the actual business implementation, and that may go beyond the design or the concept realization. So, the final 5 weeks focused on learning critical assessment methods for developing these design strategies. This part of the course focused on teaching students about identifying success measures for a design project, and they referenced the UN Sustainable Development Goals as a foundation for which students would frame their final projects. This course framework was successful in providing the students with an array of design research methods, tools, ranging from generative to evaluative. This group of students worked on the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 6, water and sanitation, and they identified an average American family as their target audience, and they developed a collection of solutions that combined to form an effective strategy at the family level to mitigate the water conservation crisis at a family level. Overall, this course framework was successful in providing students with an array of design research methods or tools, ranging from generative to evaluative research, for which the students applied them proactively across their projects. Faculty utilized group work across the projects in order to facilitate communication and camaraderie amongst this cohort, since this was our first semester in our graduate experience. Most of the students experienced design through research for the first time. So, students found the readings, the tools, guest lectures very helpful in the process. They also found their ideation to be catalyzed by the research methods and hence more productive in a shorter amount of time. However, many students wished that there was an overlap in these three distinct phases because we produced three distinct projects. So the shift from three separate projects to one with three congruent project phases would enable the students to better grasp how these methods are utilized in relation to one another. So, just to take an example, the same student who worked on social sounds, when moving on to the empathy phase, worked with a small scale apparel brand, but at the end, when they had to pitch a design strategy for a UN goal, they worked with water conservation. So, these are very isolated topics from each other, and students wish that these had more interconnections. So, a possible solution to that could look something like this, where the UN goal can be picked at the very beginning to be explored in the next two projects. So the students felt that they would more likely emerge as experts on the subject matter in this case. So by the time they actually designed proposals for water conservation and pitched it to investors at the end, they would have a much more robust understanding of what the water crisis is. In conclusion, this paper describes the curriculum for teaching design strategy as a core synergistic design research activity. It takes the combination of trend, vision, and empathy as strategies to form a synergistic design research led innovation. The collaborative pedagogical approach was complementary of design strategy as research. It was successful in teaching students the methods and tools necessary to create strategic frameworks and recommendations towards very complex, pressing global issues of today. This course was taught in the following year as well, so given the analysis of the approach, some refinements were made. Faculty reimagined the sequence and interrelations of the three projects. The first project still focused on trends as strategy, and then to kick off Project 2, students were introduced to the UN Sustainable Development Goals earlier, for which they conducted comprehensive research on a particular goal of interest. Students were still introduced to tools and methods to develop an understanding or functional literacy of the opportunity, and then visualized a framework of that understanding that incorporated all stakeholders and associated issues. The final output, however, was not a business pitch, but rather students used their framework to generate a strategy to respond to the opportunity. This restructuring was much more attainable given the complexity of the topics that were prompted to be explored. They presented strategic recommendations that were oriented towards how they might maximize positive results and limit unintended consequences rather than identifying solutions. Now, I would like to take a minute to introduce the team. Professor Brooke Brandewie is an assistant professor, also my mentor. Professor Claudia Rebola is the Associate Dean of Research as well as an Associate Professor at the University of Cincinnati. I am Neha Mann. I'm a UX and design researcher, and I was a graduate assistant in this program, and I went through this curriculum. All of our contact details are mentioned below just in case someone wants to get in touch later. You can also access my work at nehaman.com. I would like to thank DRS for organizing this opportunity for all of us to still connect. And I'm in attendance today and I will be happy to take any questions. Thank you.